preemptive laws die, some of them House bills, some of them Senate bills, on the floor of the Congress. And in the face of all of this legislative activity, we have problems that these laws are intended to produce that are still propagating. One problem is identity theft. Data breach disclosure is partly about identity theft. According to Javelin, in a 2007 publication, 8.4 million U.S. adult victims of identity fraud in 2007. And according to Javelin, those losses totaled $49.3 billion. Now, that might be a high estimate. Poneman Institute came out with a study in 2007 that said the average cost of a data breach was $197 per record. And then the Electronic Privacy Rights Clearinghouse, I went and I counted up, you know how they're always putting the log of records breached. So I just looked at the total for 2008, 35 million. So if we look at the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse and Poneman Institute, and we just take 35 million times 197, and we assume that the cost stayed at $197 for 2008. We won't inflate, okay, just for simplicity. Then losses are actually about 6.6 billion. So losses are somewhere between 6.6 billion and 49.3, big range. And who knows? You know, maybe if we put together some other numbers, we would come up with a different figure. Clearly, there's economic cost to identity theft. So we can start to use the cost of identity theft to look at, well, if we have data breach disclosure laws and they start to reduce identity theft or keep it current, then maybe we can back into some numbers about the benefit, the financial benefit of those laws. Okay? And we're going to come back to this aspect of it. But we don't only have data breach laws for identity theft. We also have data breach because we're hoping to sort of stem the erosion in the tide of our privacy. And privacy, if it's hard to metricize data breach loss, 6.6 billion to 49.3.
One question on that difference is the Javelin study, because the Poneman study.
Microphone, please.
The Poneman study, I believe, was the cost to a company of things like complying with disclosure laws or customer churn after the disclosure.
They have a couple of different studies, Poneman does.
Okay. Maybe that's what I thought the 197 came from, whereas I was wondering if the Javelin study was looking at the cost to the consumer whose identity was stolen, and whether that was included just identity theft because there was a data breach someplace, or if it was identity theft, you know, maybe because the consumer spouted out their information.
And everything that you bring up is a great point. And we'll come back to this at the very end, that metricizing any of the costs and the benefits is extremely challenging in analyzing the policy of effectiveness.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's very challenging. But my point was just that you do see wide ranges. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've seen some of them. It's even harder to get your hands around valuing privacy. It's very, very difficult. There's no single meaning, there's no one definition, a few common definitions, and I know you all have seen these definitions over and over again. You know, the condition of being left alone. How do you put an economic value to that? Even if we could put an economic value to it, how would we collect from everybody the value to them and aggregate that to come up with a cost or a benefit? would be hard to do. It would almost cost us more to collect it than it, might be worth. Out of public view and control of information about oneself, and I'm sure you've seen other definitions. My point here is just that it's very difficult to value. Some people tend to think that even if you could come up with one definition, that maybe privacy is more than the sum of its parts. And this is the idea of coherentist notions, that together all of these things have interaction effects, and it's those interaction effects that really are eroding our privacy. And that's what we have to try to get our hands around. And I just put up here, just so you know, that not everyone believes that there are interaction effects. There are policy positions that say, no, we don't need unique privacy laws. We have trespass laws, we have property rights laws, and all we need to do is extend those and apply those to the challenges. So there are people you'll run across that have this reductionist perspective. So we needed to just lay a few more pieces of groundwork before I can talk about the study that I'm currently trying to make headway on. Now, there's really no provision for privacy in the U.S. Constitution. We don't have an independent privacy oversight agency. We don't have a comprehensive privacy law in the United States. We have this patchwork. And the patchwork includes the 44 state laws, but includes some other laws. So I wanted to back up and address some of those just a little bit. So the Federal Trade Commission Act was established established the FTC in 1914 with the goal of promoting consumer protection and eliminating and preventing anti-competitive business practices. Section 5 of that act has been used in security and assurance and in data breach. It was used in the Choice Point case. And the act was amended in 2003. And the portion of it that is the result of that amendment is the Fair and Accurate Transactions Act. And it specifically is there to provide for the privacy of a consumer's credit-related data. Okay, so we've got one piece. 1974, the Privacy Act. The Privacy Act governs the federal government's information privacy program, the federal government in the United States. Tries to balance government's need to maintain records about its citizens with our need as citizens for privacy. This act came about after abuses of privacy by Richard Nixon. It applies to governmental databases and databases of contractors. There's another government law, you may be familiar with it, FISMA, the Federal Information Security Management Act. It provides for the information security program for the federal government. You've probably seen some of those reports. Blah, blah, blah agency gets a D. They give them grades, or they used to a couple years ago. Maybe they quit giving grades. I bet you wish people would quit giving grades. It is looking for the development and implementation of programs commensurate with risk. If you have been involved at all in risk analysis and information security, you know that this is a little bit of a slippery slope. We don't have good risk metrics, and now we're talking about building programs that comply with public policy based on those risk metrics. So that's a challenge. It does include requirements for detection as well as reporting and responding. It does include a breach disclosure aspect that became a little bit more specific in 2007. And again, it only applies to government systems or government contractor systems. kind of a one-off here is the Veterans